The window sticker for this Lobo says 5-liter V8 and then stops. It says nothing about 700 horsepower because the part that makes it 700 horsepower isn't on the sticker. It's in Ford's parts catalog, $10,250. A Raptor R makes 720 and starts around $113,000. This one's a Lobo and it rings up around $38,000 south of that with a warranty. Drive it around town on a 15-minute test drive and you'll never find any of it. And that's the trouble with 15 minutes behind the wheel. In anything turbocharged, there's a moment when you hit the throttle where there's just a little bit of softness, a little bit of hesitation. It used to be called turbo lag, and these days it's pretty well managed, but it's still there. This one skips all of that altogether. The 3-liter Whipple that sits on top of this Coyote spins off the crank, so the moment you ask for something is the moment you get it. Road speed, engine speed, doesn't matter. It's like this motor shows up with all 700 horses all the time. And the funny thing is, it's the small throttle openings that get you. Moderate throttle in a pickup truck that makes 700 horsepower should not be this civilized. Some of you drivers out there will totally understand what I'm saying here. Full throttle in this truck is somewhere past comedy and well into a conversation about your driver's license. Stock, the 5-liter makes peak torque at 4,250 RPM. With that supercharger and its tune on this whole situation, peak torque moves up to 5,000 RPM. And peak power hits at 6,500 RPM, so the whole character of this motor sort of shifts up. So what we've got here is a engine that's suited for a sports car, but then took a wrong turn into a pickup. On the outside and a little bit on the inside, the dual exhaust does its job, as does the Supercharger whine, and I'm not quite sure which one of them you hear the most. And I get it, we are talking about a Lobo with a Supercharger, and it has a factory warranty, so the sounds coming from this truck are a little more polite than I would have liked, and I think a Supercharger this good deserves to be heard. And I'm guilty of this too. Ford's 10-speed automatic has taken abuse in other parts of the Ford range, but here it might just be perfect. To be fair, some of that credit goes to the engine, because with an engine that makes this much torque so abundantly, the transmission is never hunting for gears. I didn't thoroughly test the gearbox, but the net result is that most of the gears work. There's no point in exploring that anymore. And speaking of exploring, you can control the transmission manually. There's some buttons here, and I tried it once to prove that it worked, and it did, and then I forgot all about it. In two-wheel drive, 590 pounds of torque against this set of all-season tires is a bit of a task, and in the dry, when you're asking for all of it, yes, there is some intervention from traction control and maybe a little sound from the tires from time to time. When you put this Lobo in sport mode, however, it quietly shifts to 4 high, and that problem stops being a problem. Ford's answer to more power was more driven wheels. Crude solution, I know, but it works. Oh, and Ford is explicit here. With this Supercharger, it's premium fuel only, minimum 91 octane. And in this case, the paperwork talks all about engine damage, not that this engine will just make a little less power. Now I'm going to tell you a story which may or may not be true. The other day I was driving this Lobo, pulled up to a stoplight, and beside me pulled up a gentleman in a Subaru WRX that was tuned, and he was clearly interested in something and had no idea what kind of truck he pulled up against. And from 0 to the speed limit, you could say what he experienced was something akin to humiliation. I stopped participating as soon as we hit the speed limit. He carried on and is still out there somewhere winning. Drive it like a normal human being and you might get 15 miles per gallon. Drive it like me and you're getting closer to 10. At that point, the trip computer stops being a measure of fuel consumption and more a measure of your enthusiasm for the throttle. Subscribers get notified when the next episode goes live. Everybody else leaves it to the algorithm. If you want to see when our next episode hits YouTube, well, that's what the subscribe button does. Steering is slow, just as it has to be in a full-size pickup truck, because the alternative is a truck that darts into an oncoming lane anytime you sneeze. Steering feel, that's not much of a thing. Thankfully, it steers accurately and will carve a proper line through a corner, but there's not a lot of feel here. It tracks straight and generally leaves you alone. Brakes are the standard F-150 bits, and that becomes a more interesting consideration when you realize they added another 300 horsepower to this truck. What I can tell you is the brakes allow me to place this truck precisely. I get great feel and modulation from the brake pedal, and on one stop that you see on camera, it stopped confidently into a little bit of ABS. Part of this Lobo package is the fact that it's lowered 2 inches at the rear, and it looks great. There's no question about that. I don't know if it changes anything dynamically, because at the end of the day, this still drives like a big F-150. Yes, I've enjoyed this in the corners. No, there's not a lot of body roll. There's less body roll than I would have expected in an F-150. You turn it in, it takes a set, carves a line, it's pretty happy. I have not explored anything beyond its limits of grip, and I'm happy to keep it that way. Reason is, we're talking about a street truck F-150 on all seasons, and that's not somewhere where I really want to go looking. The 2-inch drop doesn't change the ride. It still rides extremely comfortably, and in fact, it's not very loud in this cabin either. Road imperfections don't make it in here. This is a truck after all, but even on these 50 series sidewall 22s, ride is still comfortable. It's forgiving in almost all instances, and overall, it's fairly quiet in this cabin. Obviously, the F-150 is an important product for Ford, and they spent a lot of time ensuring this cabin would stay quiet. And I have to say, with this Lobo's 22s and the 2-inch drop, that didn't undo any of Ford's work. On any given lot, there are other trucks wearing plastic cladding and skid plates for trails they'll never see. This one is lowered on 22s and openly admits its destination is a parking lot. If you'd like to support the channel beyond just watching, the link to the merch store is here. Your support there means more time for us to produce episodes like this and a little less time worrying about industry access. No pressure, just an option. There are two things to know about this driver's seat. Number one, it adjusts by hand. Number two, there are not many directions that it'll go. I'd put the seat lower if I could, but it doesn't go any lower than this. Thankfully, it's not a problem. I ended up with a lovely interface to the truck itself. This steering wheel is not leather wrapped, and that was a bit of a surprise. But otherwise, I've got a very effective seating position, and visibility is straight up F-150 Super Crew, so means you're seated high off the road, lots of tall glass all around, and you can pretty much see everything from the driver's seat. And the best part is, when you're in traffic, you're looking down on almost every other vehicle. But don't forget, getting comfortable here means doing that by hand. Ergonomically, everything is simple and straightforward. We have separate dials for fan speed and temperature. There is no automatic climate control here. Thankfully, there is a big screen, and if you are a smartphone user, well, then you can connect your phone, use it on Apple CarPlay like I do, and it works just like it should. The instrument cluster is legible, it's configurable to a certain degree, and does exactly what you expect it to do. One surprise in this F-150 was the column shifter, because it's been a while since I've seen one of these in one of these, but I was expecting something vague and imprecise, and instead what I got was something with clear detents, and you can tell exactly which gear you've dropped it into. And in fact, I might be sold on this. I mean, I don't know why more trucks don't have these. It's such a novelty, but it's been working great for me, and the only time it's a problem is if you treat it like it's a shifter from 1978, then you find yourself in neutral, looking like a fool and questioning your life choices. The cloth upholstery here is the good cloth, and it's the kind of stuff you end up preferring after sitting on leather for a week in the hottest, most humid week of the summer. Panel panel gaps and all the buttons, switches, and dials are standard F-150 fare, and at this point in the trim walk, they're punching a little above its price. Inside this cabin, it is austere, and it is deliberate and consistent. Ford chose a very specific trim for this Lobo and didn't even attempt to sneak in one luxury feature to tell a better story in the press release. And yes, it has a key, a metal flip key that you insert into a barrel and turn. In a truck making 700 horsepower, a push-button start doesn't appear in the trim walk until you get to the XLT. So yes, Ford will sell you an extra 300 horsepower over the counter and still make you turn something. This tester is argon blue and it looks good, but in black with these black wheels, I think that's the truck you want sitting in your driveway. If this review gave you something different from a brochure or a press release, hit like. It tells YouTube to share this episode with other people like you interested in an episode like this. Takes just a second. That's what this Supercharged Lobo told me after a week. Owners have been on the forums since initial deliveries, and they do have some things to say. The hardware they argue about the most is the transfer case. That 4A setting, automatic four-wheel drive that you can run on dry pavement, does not come on an STX. Ford gives XL, STX, and XLT the electronic shift-on-the-fly case, which binds if you leave it engaged on dry pavement. Lariat and up get the automatic. The Lobo package puts the Lariat hardware under a truck 2 rungs down the ladder, and owners worked that out long before I did. Then there's the running board issue, and as you may know, the Lobo comes with some ground effects. Those ground effects sit exactly where the factory brackets go for running boards. So owners have ended up with Super Duty drop bracket spacers and an angle grinder. This may be the most accessorized truck from the factory in America, and this version of it fights back. Then there's the 2-inch drop of the Lobo. Works great for me because I have short legs, but one owner's wife is 5'1" and she still has to keep a step stool with the truck. If you own one of these or have some quality seat time behind the wheel of one of these, let me know in the comments what I got right and what I got wrong, because real-world owner experiences are much more valuable than anything I can learn on a week-long press loan, and I always read those comments. So what does it take to understand this truck? Well, certainly not 15 minutes and a lap around the block, because all that shows up is an STX on some nice wheels. What it takes is a long, wide open on-ramp and the discipline to keep your foot in it after your astonishment has worn off. That's where 700 horsepower shows up and where the truck stops being a curiosity. Most owners will find it in the first week and then happily keep finding it every week afterwards. So who buys this truck? Well, I think that's someone very specific. You want a V8, you want it sitting low, and the 22s are part of the appeal. Plus, the Supercharger doesn't move you any farther up the F-150 ladder. Walk into a Ford store because you need a truck, decide this one looks good on the lot, and then you'll spend the next year missing heated seats and automatic climate control. The Stance sells the Lobo, no question, but it's the equipment list that's the compromise you end up living with. So if you like this idea, order yourself a Lobo and have your dealer bolt on the Supercharger. The parts are a little over $10,000. It's 50 state legal, and you get a Ford warranty for 3 years and 36,000 miles. The turnkey FP700S package is about $27,000. So you get the engine like this, but also a suspension package. It also comes with wheels and some aero, and yeah, those are cool if you like other people making decisions for you. But what neither of those arguments buy is a Raptor R. That truck makes more torque and it makes it lower, and it was built to land. This one, my friends, was built to leave. And the best part of all of this is that Ford put 700 horsepower in a pickup truck available at a Ford store. And in 2026, that is something I had stopped expecting anyone to do. That's the F-150 Lobo with the Whipple Supercharger. Subscribe if you want to see more episodes like this. Don't if you don't. Comments are open if you disagree. And the link to the merch store is here if you'd like to help fund more of these. See you on the next one.